Babylon. Yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying. Oh,
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Praise and honor is due to Yehovah, the God that created the heavens and the earth, for allowing us the opportunity to breathe the breath of life and allowing us the opportunity to understand that He is God alone, to allow us the opportunity to read through His word to obtain knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and praying that it would be that which is greater than to us, so that we, as we continue to read in this word, that He would give us the information that is necessary in order for us to live, so that our lives would be meaningful before Him, that the things that we read would be meaningful unto us, and we would know how to structure our lives before Him. So we continuing on and reading the Haftorah, or the reading of the prophets, in connection with the Sidrot or the Parashot, the Torah readings of the first 5 books of the Holy Scriptures. And at this time, we're going to go into Haftarah Pekudei, which is found in the book of 1 Kings chapter 7, beginning with verse 40, concluding with verse 50. And this is in connection with the Sidra portion of Pekudei in the book of Shemot, or the book of Exodus. So at this time, this is the final Haftarah for the book of Shemot, which is a connection with the final Haftarah for Shemot, in connection with the final Torah reading of Shemot. So once again, this is Haftarah Pekudei, which is found in the book of 1 Kings chapter 7, beginning in verse 40.
We're in the book of 1 Kings chapter 7, verse 40. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And Hiram made the pans and the shovels and the basins. And Hiram finished doing all the work that he made King Solomon for the house of Yehovah. The 2 pillars and the 2 bowls of the capitals and that were on the top of the 2 pillars, and the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals which were upon the top of the pillars, and 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, 2 rows of the pomegranates for 1 network to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals that were upon the pillars, and the 10 bases and 10 basins on the bases, and 1 sea and 12 oxen under the sea, and the pans and the shovels and the basins, and all these utensils which Hiram made to King Solomon for the house of Yehovah were of the burnished bronze. And the plain of the Jordan did the king cast them in the clay ground between Sukkot and Zaretan. And Solomon left all the utensils unweighed, because they were very many, neither was the weight of the bronze determined. So
now at this time, it's basically recapping the work that Hiram did for King Solomon. You know, when we went through the previous Haftarot of Shemot, we read about the 2 pillars and the capitals atop of the 2 pillars. We read about all of this work. So basically, as we get to the end of this chapter, for this Haftarah reading, is basically giving us a recap and accounting of everything that was done for the temple of the Most High God. And that's, you know, the connection between this Haftarah reading and the Torah reading of Pekudei, which Pekudei, meaning the countings of, is basically where they took account of everything that was done, all of the gold that was, you know, brought in, all of the silver that was brought in, and all the bronze that was brought in, or the brass that was brought in, and that was weighed, and they would use all of it for the work of the tent of meeting at that time. So now we get in the accountings of all of the things that went into building the temple, but there was so much, you know, gold, silver, and bronze, or copper that went into the building of the temple, that it was left unweighed, as it said here. But everything, you know, was used for the purpose of building the temple. Nothing was used for any other expenses. So we're now getting, you know, a recap of everything that was done. The 2 pillars that were at the entrance of the temple, you know, they were lavas, because there was a big sea that was built and put upon 12 oxen, which was filled with water. And from that water, it was put into the 10 lavas where the priest would wash their hands and their feet before performing anything. But once again, this portion is focusing more on, you know, just recapping the temple building and all of the materials that was used to build the temple itself.
Verse 48. And Solomon made all the utensils that belonged to the house of Yahweh, the altar of gold and the table of gold, upon which was the bread of display, and the lampstands of pure gold, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left before the sanctuary, with the flowers and the lamps and the thongs of gold, and the bowls and the snuffers and the basins and the spoons and the dishes for incense of pure gold, and the hinges of gold, both for the doors of the inner court of the inner house and most holy place, and for the doors of the house, namely of the temple. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. So once again, everything is just taken into account of what was utilized, on the materials that were utilized to build the temple. The tent of meeting itself was just on a smaller scale, and it was something portable for the children of Israel to utilize as they were journeying through the desert. So at each stage they would erect the tent of meeting and be able to worship the Most High God. And the tent of meeting itself had its courtyard, and then within the tent itself it had 2 chambers, which was the holy, where it had the menorah, the table of showbread, and the incense altar, and then it had the Holy of Holies, which contained the Ark of the Covenant. Now the temple that King Solomon built was basically used from, or basically was built off of that model, but was built on a larger scale. So it also had a holy section and a Holy of Holies, as it was explained here. And instead of 1 menorah, which was in the tent of meeting, Solomon had 10 menorahs, or 10 menorot that were built in the holy area, 5 on each side. But there was also a table of showbread, and although that doesn't mention it explicitly, we know that there was also an incense altar, from other readings in 1 Kings, in the holy area. And in the Holy of Holies is where they brought the Ark of the Covenant in. And so once again, the temple that King Solomon was built they used the model of the tent of meeting that the children of Yisrael built in the desert, and it was just built on a larger scale, a grander scale, and a more beautiful scale, based on the pattern that King David left for King Solomon to utilize. And they were able to worship the Most High God because King David had it in mind to build his house for the Most High God's name to be worshipped at. So once again, this portion is toward this Haftarah reading, in connection with the Torah reading, is just the accounting of all of the materials that was used to go into the temple at this time. As in the Torah reading, we read about the materials that were used to go into the tent of meeting in the desert. We read about the great work that Bezalel and Aholiab, they were imbued with the wisdom of God to build these things. So King Solomon had Hiram, who he hired out, who had the wisdom of God to build these things also. So it's just showing the comparison of the workers that were utilized to build the work, the materials that were donated to use the work, and how everything was done according to the specifications that were laid out, and all of it was approved by the Most High God in the book of Exodus and in here in 1 Kings. So we ask that the Most High God will bless the works of our hands and allow us to be able to build magnificent places for his name to be worshipped in, and in the long run, praying that he would allow us to return back to the land of Israel once again, where we would be able to build the great house that he had designed and left his pattern for us to follow in the days to come, praying that that day will come speedily, where we would worship him and honor his name the way that he wants us to do so. Blessed is his holy name forever. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
By the rivers of Babylon, yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying.